I mentioned before that I had great mind to see the whole island, and that I had travelled up the brook and so on to where I built my bower, and where I had an opening quite to the sea on the other side of the island. I now resolved to travel quite across to the seashore on that side. So taking my gun and hatchet, and my dog, and a larger quantity of powder and shot than usual, with 2 biscuit cakes and a great bunch of raisins in my pouch for my store, I began my journey. When I had passed the vale where my bower stood, as above, I came within a view of the sea to the west, and it being a very clear day, I fairly descried land. Whether an island or continent, I could not tell, but it lay very high, extending from the west to the west-southwest at a very great distance. By my guess, it could not be less than 15 or 20 leagues off. I saw abundance of parrots, and fain would have caught one, if possible, to have kept it to be tame, and taught it to speak to me. I did, after some painstaking, catch a young parrot, for I knocked it down with a stick, and having recovered it, I brought it home, but it was some years before I could make him speak. However, at last, I taught him to call me by my name very familiarly. But the accident that followed, though it be a trifle, will be very diverting in its place. I was exceedingly diverted with this journey. I found the low grounds, hares, as I thought them to be, and foxes, but they differed greatly from all other kinds I had met with. Nor could I satisfy myself to eat them, though I killed several, but I had no need to be venturous, for I had no want of food, and of that which was very good too, especially these 3 sorts, namely goats, pigeons, and turtle or tortoise, which added to my grapes, Leadenhall market, could not have furnished a better table than I. In proportion to the company, and though my case was deplorable enough, yet I had great cause for thankfulness that I was not driven to any extremities of food, but rather plenty, even dainties. As soon as I came to the seashore, I was surprised to see that I had taken up my lot on the worst side of the island. For here, indeed, the shore was covered with innumerable turtles, whereas on the other side I found but 3 in a year and a half. Here was also an infinite number of fowls of many kinds, some of which I had not seen before, and many of them very good meat, but such as I knew not the names of except those called penguins. I could have shot as many as I pleased, but was very sparing of my powder and my shot, and therefore had more mind to kill the she-goat, if I could, which I could better feed on. And though there were many goats here, more than on this other side of the island, yet it was with much more difficulty that I could come near them, the country being flat and even, and they saw me much sooner than I was on the hills. I confess this side of the country was much pleasanter than mine, but yet I had not the least inclination to remove, for, as I was fixed in my habitation, it became natural to me, and I seemed, all the while I was here, to be, as it were, upon a journey, and from, however, I travelled along the shore of the sea toward the east, I suppose about 12 miles, and then, setting up a great pole upon the shore for the mark, I concluded I would go home again, and the next journey I should be on the other side of the island, east from my dwelling, and so round, till I came to my post again, of which in its place. I took another way to come back than I went, thinking I would easily keep all the island so much in my view, that I could not miss finding my first dwelling by viewing the country, but I found myself mistaken. I wandered about very uncomfortably, and at last was obliged to find out the seaside I looked for my post, and come back the same way I went. And then, by easy journeys, I turned homeward, the weather being exceedingly hot, and my gun ammunition, hatchet, and other things very heavy. In this journey my dog surprised a young kid, and seized upon it, and I running in to take hold of it, caught and saved it alive from the dog. I had a great mind to bring it home, if I could, for I had often been musing whether it might not be possible to get a kid or two, and so raise a breed of tame goats which might supply me with when my powder shot should be spent. I made a collar for this little creature, and with a string which I made of some rope yarn, which I always carried about me, I led him along, though with some difficulty, till I came from my bower, and where I enclosed him, and left him, for I was very impatient to be at home, from whence I had been absent above a month. I cannot express what a satisfaction it was to me to come into my old hutch, and to lie down in my hammock bed, This little wandering journey without a settled place of abode had been so unpleasant to me that my own house, as I called it to myself, was a perfect settlement to me compared to that, and it rendered everything about me so comfortable that I resolved I would never go a great way from it again, while it should not be my lot to stay on the island. I reposed myself here a week to rest and regale myself after my long journey, during which most of the time was taken up in the weighty affair of making a cage for my Pole, who began now to be mere domestic, and to be mighty well acquainted with me. Then I began to think of the poor kid which I had pent in within my circle, and resolved to go and fetch it home, and give some food. Accordingly I went and found it where I left it, for, indeed, I could not get out, but was almost starved for want of food. I went and cut boughs of trees and branches of each shrubs as I could find, and threw it over, and having fed it, I tied it as I did before, to lead it away. But it was so tame with being hungry that I do not need to have tied it, for it followed me like a dog, and, as I continually fed it, the creature became so loving, so gentle, and so fond, that it became from that time one of my domestics also, and would never leave me afterwards. The rainy season of the autumnal equinox was now come, and I kept the 30th of September in the same solemn manner as before, being the anniversary of my landing on the island. Having now been there 2 years, and no more prospect of being delivered than the first day I came there, I spent the whole day in humble and thankful acknowledgments of the many wonderful mercies which my solitary condition was attended with, and without which it might have been indefinitely more miserable. I gave humble and hearty thanks that God had been pleased to discover me even that it was possible I might be more happy in the solitary condition than I should have been in the liberty of society, and in all the pleasures of the world, that he could fully make up to me the deficiencies of my solitary state, and the want of human society, by his presence and the communication of his grace to my soul, supporting, comforting, and encouraging me to depend upon the providence here, and hope for his eternal presence hereafter. It was now that I began to sensibly feel how much more happy the life I now led was, with all its miserable circumstances, than the wicked, cursed, abominable life I led all the past part of my days. And now, having changed both my sorrows and my joys, my various desires altered my affections, changed their gust, and my delights were perfectly new from what they were at the first coming, or indeed for the 2 years past. But now I began to exercise myself with new thoughts. I daily read the Word of God, and applied all my comforts to my present state. One morning, being very sad, I opened the Bible upon the words, "I will never leave thee nor forsake thee." Immediately occurred that these words were to me. Why else would they be directed in such a manner? Just at the moment when I was mourning over my condition as one forsaken of God and man. "Well then," said I, "if God does not forsake me, of what ill consequence can it be, or what matters it though the world should all forsake me? Seeing, on the other hand, if I had all the world, and should lose the favor and blessing of God, there would be no comparison in the loss." Thus, and in this disposition of mind, I began my 3rd year. And though I have not given the reader the trouble of so particular an account of my works this year as the first, yet in general it might be observed that I was very seldom idle, having regularly divided my time according to the several daily employments that were before me, such as, first, my duty to God, and reading the Scriptures, which I constantly set apart some time for thrice every day. Secondly, the going abroad with my gun for food, which generally took me up 3 hours every morning when it did not rain. Thirdly, the ordering, curing, preserving, and cooking that I had killed or catch for my supply. These took up great part of the day. Also, it is to be considered that in the middle of the day, when the sun was in zenith, the violence of the heat was too great to stir out, so that about 4 hours in the evening was all the time I could be supposed to work in, with this exception, that sometimes I changed my hours of hunting and working, and went to work in the morning, and abroad with my gun in the afternoon. To this short time allowed for labor, I desire may be added the exceeding laboriousness of my work, the many hours which, for want of tools, want to help, and want of skill, everything that I did took up out of my time. For example, I was full 42 days making me broad making me a board for a long shelf, which I wanted in my cave, whereas two sawyers, with their tools and saw pit, could have cut them out of the same tree in half a day.